Hi there. Today I'll be talking about, yes, Paul Joseph Watson. PJW. SJW? Peanut butter and jelly. PJ. Pajamas? Honestly, I haven't picked a single name to roll with yet. If you're not familiar with him, he's Alex Jones's right-hand man and a journalist, and I use that term very loosely, for InfoWars. He's notorious for gotcha videos, dunking on the feminists, leftists, etc. He's also notorious for misreading or intentionally twisting facts, never citing his sources, and always cheekily cropping the pictures of headlines he uses. Most of the time, he just regurgitates outright lies and far-right talking points. A cursory search through his sources that he flashes for 2 seconds at a time during his videos reveals websites like InfoWars, Voice of Europe, Breitbart, and Jihad Watch. Yes. He has an interesting way of getting his points across. I call his strategy an information dump, a sort of blitzkrieg of the mind where he tries to overwhelm you with information, whether true or false. Usually false. Here I'll simply show that he doesn't read his sources well or intentionally twist them. He doesn't understand nuance, or the English language in some cases, is a massive hypocrite, is ignorant of the most basic medical science and science in general, is a snowflake that argues emotionally when faced with facts that don't align with his worldview, and finally, is nothing more than a shady snake oil salesman. Well, without further ado, let's start. So, first point, the truth about migrants. You'll see many of his videos with the title, The Truth About, followed with whatever he pulls out of a hat that day or something. Usually, the truth about blank collides with the actual truth about that thing, and this case is no different. Before I start, remember that these are human lives that, in the most part, have escaped either war or crushing poverty and are just trying to survive. His rhetoric just fans the flames of intolerance and makes the things he complains about, like integration, employment, etc., more difficult to attain.
Over 500,000 people have signed a petition saying they reject Muslim immigration into their country. What kind of bigoted, backward, white trash would dare do such a thing? Oh, it's South Korean. When asked why he opposed Islamic immigration, one South Korean professor said his main concerns were pedo, grooming gangs, and terrorism. He also said that Muslims just don't integrate. He said, quote, "We have seen on television just how many problems are caused when a country like Germany or the UK is relaxed about immigration and the damage it does to society."
So, his first claim is that Muslims don't integrate. This is simply false. In a 2017 press release from the Bertelsmann Stiftung Religion Monitor, the integration of Muslim immigrants in Western Europe is making clear progress. By the second generation, at the latest, the majority have entered mainstream society. This is evident in the findings of the Bertelsmann Stiftung Religion Monitor 2017, which investigated language competence, education, working life, and interreligious contact of Muslims in France, the UK, Austria, Germany, and Switzerland. The successful integration is all the more notable because none of these 5 countries offer consistently good opportunities for participation, and Muslims encounter open rejection from about 1/5 of the population. It goes on to say, despite their different countries of origin, different creeds, and different reasons for migrating, the integration of nearly 14 million Muslims in these 5 countries tends to run a similar course. Muslims seize the opportunities for participation that arise, and they want to continue practicing their religion. Although the latter is not readily accepted by mainstream society, it does not hinder integration. Islam is not an obstacle to integration. Muslims, even the highly religious, learn the new language and strive for higher education levels just as much as other immigrants. This was stated by Stefan Vopel, who is a Bertelsmann Stiftung expert on social cohesion. Usually, this integration occurs counter to opposition felt by Muslims in Europe. I strongly recommend you read the report if you're interested, as it details language, education, different aspects of integration, employment, etc., etc. I've included it in the description. Something to note is that, as you may expect, integration is a two-way street. Effort has to be made both by migrants in Europe and the states accepting them. Funnily enough, while researching this particular topic, I found something interesting. In the UK, certain politicians, in an attempt to attack Pakistani and Bangladeshi immigrants in Britain, tried to use proficiency of the English language as a criteria. Hilariously, research into this showed that it is other white people, and not those brown immigrants that couldn't speak English as well. I don't see PJ crusading against Polish immigrants, though.
What damage? What's he talking about? I mean, it's not like teenage girls are being raped and strangled by migrants in Germany.
Another claim is teenage girls are being raped and strangled in Germany, which is referring to the killing of Susanna Feldman. For some reason, this is supposed to be some groundbreaking evidence. This man was a criminal and did horrible and disgusting things to this poor woman. This does not mean, however, that he's a representative of all migrants. Let's do a quick mental exercise. Let's give Paul the claim. No, let's increase it to 1,000 such cases. Keep in mind that 1 million migrants arrived in 2015, the year this criminal arrived in Germany. So, doing some quick math, this comes out to 0.1% of all migrants that arrived in 2015. Let's be reminded that we greatly exaggerated the number of crimes and intentionally didn't calculate the total number of migrants in Germany, meaning out of all migrants currently in Germany, it's an even smaller number. If this crime was committed by a German national, I doubt PJ would have presented it as some representative case of the entire German population. I'm simply extending that courtesy to the migrant population. Let's not excuse horrible crimes like this, but also let's not paint with a broad brush.
It's not like when AFD members try to have a minute's silence in Parliament for these victims. It gets booed and heckled by leftists and Green Party members.
Die vorgesehene Redezeit widmen wir dem Gedenken an die in Wiesbaden tot aufgefundene Susanna. Sie wurde 14 Jahre alt. Aus der Erde kommst du und zur Erde wirst du werden.
Noch etwas zu sagen? Ansonsten würde ich die nächste Rednerin und den nächsten Redner aufrufen. Die SPD und ich fordere Sie auf, das Redepult zu verlassen.
This claim is just outright nonsense. Notice that clever little edit there? Well, it wasn't really clever, it was very obvious actually. Let's have a watch ourselves and see what happens, shall we?
Sehr geehrte Frau Präsidentin, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren Kollegen, die Fraktion der Alternative für Deutschland tritt der kurzfristigen Aufsetzung der Zusatzpunkte 5 und 6 auf die Tagesordnung entgegen. Die vorgesehene Redezeit widmen wir dem Gedenken an die in Wiesbaden tot aufgefundene Susanna. Sie wurde 14 Jahre alt. Aus der Erde kommst du und zur Erde wirst du werden.
Darf ich Sie hinweisen, dass wir gerade zur Geschäftsordnung reden und ich würde auch bitten, dass Sie sich an die vorgegebene Tagesordnung und an die Geschäftsordnungsdebatte halten. Etwas zu sagen? Ansonsten würde ich die nächste Rednerin und den nächsten Redner aufrufen. Da Sie mir nicht antworten, ist damit Ihre Rede oder Ihr Beitrag beendet und ich gebe das Wort jetzt Carsten Schneider für die SPD und ich fordere Sie auf, das Redepult zu verlassen. Carsten Schneider für die SPD-Fraktion.
Man, that room was about to burst from all the rabble-rousing and booing. As we saw, the AFD member was disrupting a discussion about something completely unrelated, and he was told to either discuss the matter at hand or make room for another speaker. After being addressed numerous times, he refused to answer and finally left the podium. This is a standard dishonest nonsense peddled by PJW. Also, Thomas Seitz, the guy in the video, is an AFD member. He has referred to migrants as invaders, has spoken out in favor of the use of the N-word, and has his own Zeitz Brigade, a right-wing street gang that calls him commander. Yes, this is the guy that he wants to particularly highlight. Jesus. Alright, the FD party itself was also very controversial, with some members being very fond of Nazi regalia and slogans, etc., but this is a topic for another video altogether.
It's not like this young lady, a pro-refugee activist, was abducted and murdered by a Moroccan migrant in Germany.
Another claim is this: migrant activist disappears, Moroccan trucker arrested. Interestingly, such a clear-cut title is only used by sources like InfoWars and Breitbart. The original source has a lot more nuance, as you may expect. So, supposedly, a migrant activist herself was murdered by a migrant. How could a story not be more in favor of what the right has been saying? Well, only if it did really say that. In the article, it's mentioned that a suspect had been arrested, meaning he's a suspect. So for you to suggest he did it already is kinda hypocritical. This guilty until proven innocent approach was condemned by Peanut Butter and Jelly himself in another video.
The preeminence of innocent until proven guilty is being jettisoned. Now, mere accusation alone is enough to ruin someone's career. Do you understand how dangerous that is?
Now, the driver in question was driving to Morocco and was not himself a migrant. Very cheeky. This video is supposed to be detailing how horrible migrants are in Europe, yet he's using examples of people who aren't migrants. Another thing, the far right is using her death for their unpleasant purposes, and her family explicitly denounces that. Her brother has said that, to quote, he has since tried to do two things that are difficult to reconcile. On the one hand, to rest and grieve, and on the other, to prevent his dead sister from being exploited by the far right. These people are against everything my sister stood for, he says. I do not want to let her become part of their story. Sophia Loesch, excuse me if I mispronounced her name, I'm not too familiar with German, was a feminist and was against racism and supported refugees. Her brother knew that her death would play into their hands. To quote him, Moroccan driver as perpetrator, young German refugee worker as a victim. Is there a nicer combination for the right? That same far right, mind you, that uses this poor woman's death as a political tool also has berated her and her family. Her brother said that there was a flood of hate mail, abuse, and threats. He saved some of it on his computer. Some said Sophia earned her death. Others called her drug-infested cattle, which had become involved with the niggers and hence deserved her death. Others wished her entire family to be wiped out. Her brother says that the hate mail increased significantly when the body was found later. These are the people that claim to care when pulling political stunts like the silent march in her honor. Paul is doing exactly what she and her family don't want, against their expressed interests. She isn't a poor victim he's trying to honor, but a political tool for his twisted agenda.
It's not like Christian girls are being bullied, beaten and abused in schools across Germany. It's not like a head teacher in one school said the solution to this was to cover them up with a hijab.
The next claims that some Christian girl was bullied by Muslims and told to wear a headscarf by the headmaster of some school. This is simply incompatible with logic, but let's dig a little. The source is, of course, Bild. You should familiarize yourself with Bild, as it's the go-to website for German news on the right wing. Bild has been described as notorious for its mix of gossip, inflammatory language, and sensationalism. Equivalent to The Sun in Britain. Yes, a subpar tabloid that spreads celebrity gossip and racism. That is the source. In the article, not a single name is given, and all evidence is anecdotal. Parts of it, I'd actually say all, are clearly made up. For example, a Muslim child saying all Christians must believe in Allah or go to hell to a Christian child. The problem with this is that every Muslim knows that they worship the same God as the Christians and the Jews. Allah is only the Arabic word for God, and both Arab Christians and Arab Jews use that word. This was clearly written by someone who doesn't know what Muslims believe. Interestingly, after trying to find another source for this claim as well, I couldn't. Not a single reputable news source has reproduced this claim, and all other sources I found, such as Defend Europa with a V, or The Rebel, linked back to Bild. Fantastic. Alright, let's speed this up a bit.
Aber wir müssen akzeptieren, dass die Zahl der Straftaten bei jugendlichen Migranten besonders hoch ist.
Here he claims that Merkel admitted crime rates are higher amongst migrants. Of course, he twists the facts to suit his agenda, so let's actually look at the details and see if he's truthful. As you may expect, he isn't. The clip is from 2011, so it's not in reference to the migrant boom of 2014 onwards. Dishonest already. Also, of course, young males commit more crime. That is a fact across every single country. To quote The Age and Crime Relationship by the Pennsylvania State University, age is a consistent predictor of crime, both in the aggregate and for the individuals. The most common findings across countries, groups, and historical periods shows that crime, especially ordinary or street crime, tends to be a young person's activity. What PJ didn't mention is that a significant chunk of these crimes are fare dodging on public transport. A crime nonetheless, of course, but not what I think will bring down Germany. Since we're on the topic, let's talk about migrant crime. The Independent reported that in 2017, crime in Germany was at its lowest in 30 years. According to a 2018 study by German criminologists, the crime rate of non-Germans between the ages of 16 and 30 is within the same range as that of Germans. According to a report by the Federal Criminal Police Office, which is the investigative institute that deals with crime in Germany, refugees are as likely to commit delinquent acts as the German population. A report released by the German Federal Office of Criminal Investigation in November of 2015 found that over the period between January and September 2015, the crime rates of refugees was the same as that of native Germans. Interestingly, populations overrepresented in crime are asylum seekers from Serbia, Macedonia, and Kosovo, while Iraqis and Syrians are underrepresented. doubly interesting because it flies right in the face of people like PJ, because it isn't the barbaric Asiatic hordes that are overrepresented, but native Europeans. In that report, the head of the department concluded that there is no disproportionate increase in crime due to asylum seekers and refugees. The only significant rise in crime has been against refugees, in fact. Crimes by far-right groups and individuals have tripled. Remember, people like Pajama never present nuanced opinions. It's always black and white to them, especially when dealing with crime. A lot of the time you deal with suspects rather than proven criminals, and migrants are twice as likely to be accused of a crime whether they did it or not. If you put a magnifying glass over a certain group of people, all of a sudden you find more crimes. Just remember that African Americans in the US are way more likely to be arrested for marijuana use, despite the fact that marijuana use between blacks and whites is about the same.
It's not like the media asserted Donald Trump was a liar for saying that Germany had problems with migrant crime.
The United States will not be a migrant camp. You look at what's happening in Europe, you look at what's happening in other places, we can't allow that to happen to the United States, not on my watch.
While the media itself reported that migrant crime in Germany, specifically violent crime, was soaring.
Trump is right, and a whole host of cherry-picked headlines without any context. Aside from the fact that Trump is rarely correct about anything, this has all been disproven already. An article from The Independent has already debunked Trump's claims point by point. I'll include it in the description, as well as all my other sources. I'm not like PJ, I do include all my sources.
While 90% of the rise in violent crime was attributable to refugees, according to the government's own numbers.
Alright, he claims here that there's been a higher rate of crime against German nationals, and migrants are responsible for 90% of crimes in Lower Saxony. Here, he's being very dishonest. What the article truly claims is that there has been a 10.4% increase in reported crime, and out of that 10.4%, 90% is attributed to migrants. Note the difference between reported crime and total crime. Reported crime is basically when someone sees something, assumes a crime is happening, and lets the police know. Total crime is actual confirmed breaching of the law that goes into the books. The original source for the claim makes this distinction very clearly, yet PJ must have just missed that part instead of intentionally omitting it. Yes. Another thing he must have just casually missed was that the study's authors said part of the increase was due to the fact that crimes committed by migrants were twice as likely to be reported compared to those committed by German nationals. Yet another thing he must have missed is how the article states that the study said the 14 to 30 age bracket formed the largest of its kind for migrants in Lower Saxony, suggesting that in turn contributed to the link between the rising rate of crime and the increase in migrant arrivals in the state. Nuance just doesn't exist in PJ's vocabulary, I assume.
It's not like Jews are being whipped and abused by migrants on the streets of Berlin.
Here, he claims that Jews are being whipped in the streets. This claim might be true actually, but not in the way that Pajama Bottoms wants. 95% of anti-Semitic crime is committed by the sort of people who enjoy Soyboy Watson's videos.
It's not like German police had to flee in panic when 200 migrants rioted after they tried to deport a failed asylum seeker.
Here, he mentions how some Togolese people prevented a deportation. So, one isolated incident can't be representative of hundreds of thousands of migrants, as we've already seen. Plus, the next day, the police went in there and did what they had to do. Seems like they have everything under control to me. I don't know what all the doomsday talk is about. Man, go get a cup of tea, relax a bit, maybe leave the house for once. It might help you calm down a bit. This nonsense goes on for too long. He goes on to talk about the Sweden rape nonsense, which has been disproven time and time again, a renaming of a single strait in support of the Palestinian cause, and then further general whining about immigrants. About the Sweden rape myth, well, I'll go through it really quickly. Imagine if some horrible husband raped his wife every day for a year. The wife finally goes to the police and tells them her story. If the police file her case as one single case, then it gets counted as one single case, as in one rape. If they file every instance of rape, though, then it's considered 365 rapes. This is how Sweden deals with rape. Every instance of rape is counted as its own individual case. Add on top of the fact that Sweden has a very broad definition of rape, and you get higher rape statistics. This sort of nuance is never appreciated by the likes of Paul. The official website of the government of Sweden actually even has a dedicated section to debunking this twisting of facts by the right. As for the renaming of streets, well, it was a single street. Nakba is an Arabic term used by Palestinians to refer to their forced eviction from their homes by Israel in 1948, and I honestly don't see an issue with this sign. Interestingly, Israeli pressure has forced the mayor of the city to remove the sign. Even more interestingly, it was removed more than a month before PJ put out his video. So, he was raving about a single street sign that didn't exist anymore when he made the video, as evidence that migrants are taking over Europe. Yes, the pinnacle of rationality and facts. He goes on to mention the banning of anti-migrant videos on YouTube in Germany, while ignoring that they usually have overt Nazi imagery or rhetoric in them. He then goes on to blame immigrants for their unemployment, citing the Netherlands, the example with the highest discrepancy. Oh, cheeky PJ, you deserve a slap on the wrist for that one. Of course, he doesn't cite the German example, which has barely any discrepancy in employment between the two groups. Things are usually not so black and white. The Economist wrote a lovely article detailing some reasons for the lack of employment in some parts, and surprise, surprise, it isn't because those backward, uncivilized savages from Africa don't want to work. In the sources I cited at the beginning of the video, it was mentioned that, however, it is in Germany and Switzerland that Muslims are most successful in integrating into the job market. In both these countries, the rate of gainful employment among Muslims no longer differs from that of the total population. Immigrants there benefit significantly from the high demand for labor, but contributing factors also include expedited work permits that open up the labor market, along with community job placement initiatives and language courses. In France, with its tight and relatively impermeable job market, even Muslims with a good school-leaving qualifications are more likely to be unemployed and less likely to work full-time. So, as you may have expected, this entire video is chock full of lies or disgusting twisting of facts to practically serve a proto-fascist political agenda.
I'm just utterly baffled as to why the 500,000 plus South Koreans who signed that petition wouldn't want any of this coming to their country. They must believe in South Korea staying South Korean.
They must believe in South Korea staying South Korean. I found this bit especially funny. Honestly, coming from him, this is nothing more than a rephrasing of the old fascist line, Europe for Europeans, Africa for Africans. All too convenient when you disregard the centuries of colonialism that enriched these European countries in the first place and made them an attractive destination for migrants. What makes it even funnier, though, is just how much Mr. Alpha over here complains about snowflakes and their safe spaces, when he himself wants to make whole nations safe spaces for white people. PJ, you just might be a snowflake. Also, remember, migrants are just people trying to survive in a new country. This was a lot of back and forth of migrants dangerous / migrants not dangerous, and honestly, this distracts from the humanity of those being discussed. His constant lying and twisting of facts is nothing but an example of a wider pattern on the right that obfuscates truth in order to justify bigotry and bigoted violence. Alright, next point, number 2. Let me just check the script to jog my memory, and there it is. His dumbass ad for his quack iodine supplement. Let's start with this. PJ works for InfoWars, the Alex Jones conspiracy channel, essentially. On their website, they sell all sorts of, supplements, I guess, ranging from Survival Shield X, which is just iodine, to Super Male Vitality, for those rock-hard Alex Jones erections. You can also get, the True Alpha Male Pack, because nothing screams alpha like roots. What all these have in common is that they're all bullshit, essentially. PJ puts up this entire facade to slaying sketchy erectile dysfunction pills. Honestly, that is all the debunking you need, really. Let's have some fun and look through his stuff, shall we? One of the products sold is Silver Bullet, which is just colloidal silver. This is interesting for me, since during my first semester med school, I had to do a project that covered colloidal silver. The claim goes that colloidal silver has powerful antimicrobial effects. Now, this was believed for quite a while during the early 20th century, but it was quickly evident that it isn't the whole truth. Colloidal silver has been shown to have antibacterial properties in vitro, which means in a petri dish or test tube, but no evidence has ever been shown it to be effective in vivo, which means used internally in a human being. Also, while it has shown some effectiveness as a topical antibiotic, it was superseded long ago by way more effective topical antibiotics like polymyxin B, which is Neosporin in the US, I believe. In excessive use, colloidal silver in excessive use can cause argyria. It can severely damage certain tissues and can interact with other drugs like tetracycline, which is an actually effective antibiotic. Honestly, this stuff is dangerous, especially when sold to gullible people. He also sells iodine.
Survival Shield X2 Nascent Iodine. If you're interested in healthy thyroid, if you're interested in well-being, if you're interested in having a higher IQ, which this has been linked to, get your powerful Survival Shield X2 at InfoWarsStore.com.
Something that you don't need supplemented if you live in a country that has iodized salt and doesn't have malnutrition. If you do honestly need iodine supplementation, then get it from a pharmacy, not Alex Jones. You can go and have a look yourself on the Alex Jones website and see the stuff they sell on that store, but honestly, for the most part, it's just ingredients that either have no scientific use or have no proven scientific use, or may have some proven scientific use but are provided in such small amounts that it probably wouldn't help you in the first place. Add on top of the fact that everything is horrifically overpriced on that website, and you just get, conspiracy theory people buying stupid shit that they don't need because Daddy Alex Jones told them to. Now, peanut butter and jelly sure does love rustling some jimmies. Want to know what he loves even more, though? Hypocrisy. Here's a short list of his constant flip-flopping. Here he is, anti-boycott. Here he is, pro-boycott. Here he is, anti-censorship. Here he is, pro-censorship. Here he is saying jokes should have no limits, versus some things should be off-limit. Here he is pro and anti-safe space. And of course the aforementioned guilty until proven innocent incident, excuse me. Point number 4, he thinks depression isn't a real illness.
It's now a form of virtue signalling to constantly drone on about how depressed you are. You see it all over YouTube, these snivelling hug and confess videos made by privileged millennial brats who haven't had a proper day of hardship in their entire lives.
I mean, really, do I even need to say anything about this? In his absolutely garbage video, he claims that depression has only become commonplace in modern society. Well, that simply isn't true. Depression existed way before. It's just that we didn't have the scientific criteria to explain depression until very recently. He goes on to show a picture of happy African children, as if to claim that depression doesn't exist in these horribly exploited parts of our globe. He goes on to misunderstand what depression is and argues for strengthening stigma against depressed people, because, sad, reclusive people should be further ostracized from society. That'll show him how to be happy. This entire video can be summed up as, depression doesn't exist, and if you're sad, then just be happy. My, what would our world do without the genius of PJ? Look, I'm not going to go through the whole video, because I'm sure you know that depression is a real thing. At this point, I was going to bust out all the research, explain how depression works, its prevalence, etc., and then I realized that Dr. Layman on YouTube has already done all the work. I'll link his video in the description. Point number 5. The notorious British documentary about Roman Britain. First of all, it wasn't really like a documentary, it was like a short clip aimed at 11 to 13-year-olds, I believe. PJ makes an ignorant comment about Roman Britain and then proceeds to get his ass handed to him by someone actually knowledgeable about the subject. In his ass-handing I can't say that line seriously. In his ass-handing process, it's mentioned how we have accounts of Iraqis, represent, and Syrians on Hadrian's Wall, how the Lane Street girl was from the southern Mediterranean, how the Spiral Field woman's DNA was traced back to Rome, and how we have evidence of high-status North Africans in York. This sort of evidence only keeps building with time as well. Where does he think that the name Britain came from to begin with? Number 6. This is a point that might be a little bit too medical for some people, but I still included it, so why not? All of these alpha, red-pilled, masculine, sex-bomb types love to talk about themselves. The greatest mark of a person secure in their masculinity and heterosexuality is when they constantly remind you about how masculine and heterosexual they are. One of the things they always harp on about is testosterone. They like to reduce the incredibly complex dynamics of the human endocrine system into a simple up testosterone good, down testosterone bad. Putting aside the fact that they have no idea what they're talking about, let me apply some of my medical knowledge. Let me introduce you to the epiphyseal plate. Say hi. The epiphyseal plate is, in very simple terms, a bit of cartilage responsible for statuary growth, meaning what makes your bones longer and hence makes you taller. This bit of cartilage, for the most part, fuses with the bone in late puberty and early adulthood. Interestingly, high levels of sex hormones, meaning estrogen for women and testosterone for men, cause the epiphyseal plate to fuse sooner, meaning the statement, those with more testosterone tend to be shorter, has some weight. Let me repeat that statement. Those with more testosterone tend to be shorter, has some weight. Hold on, I hear you scream. No, don't do that, please. Isn't being a 6'5" Adonis part of being an alpha woman-slaying stud? I do all my measurements in metric, so 6'5" just means tall as fuck to me, but yes, according to these guys that don't understand science in the least, tall equals alpha. Being short is apparently a beta trait. Well, sorry to inform you, PJ, but you might be pretty beta. Now, of course, the alpha beta stuff is nonsense, and height has a lot more at play, but I'm just using this as yet another example of Mr. Paul Joseph Watson not knowing what he is talking about, as usual. Also, there's a little bit that I want to include that it's too small to make it a point on its own, so I'm just going to mention it. In his video on tattoos, he puts up a clip of people getting henna tattoos, and he's talking about how tattoos aren't cool, and he keeps talking about, permanently putting ink to your skin, all that kind of stuff. And then he shows a clip of henna, of a fucking henna tattoo. Oh my god. If you don't know what a henna tattoo is, it's basically like a special type of ink that they use. It's common in the Middle East and Indian subcontinent. Women usually decorate their hands and their faces with it, and it stays just for like a couple of weeks and then it goes away. That's it. It's not a permanent tattoo, it's just something nice, but whatever. Conclusions. Why does he do this? In the end, it's evident that our soy-loving, safe space-demanding snowflake of a baby boy, Paul Joseph Watson, doesn't understand science, or statistics, nuance, fucking English for that matter. He cherry-picks headlines, hides certain facts, and makes up the rest. Exceptional cases are treated like the norm, and 1 in a million cases are painted as if they are epidemics. He sees one migrant doing something and accuses the whole population. He carries the attitude of, if they haven't done any crime yet, they will. In his video on migrants, he used the example of a single migrant who made ricin, a deadly component, at home and then proceeds to handle it as if every migrant is doing it, rather than the exceptional case that it is. He also conveniently left out the fact that German police were monitoring him and that they found no evidence of a plan to attack, so on and so forth. Applying his same method to other examples, though, it can yield horrifying results. For example, a German pensioner was arrested last year over threats to poison Haribo bears with cyanide. What can we possibly do in the face of such an epidemic? Old people are running around unhappy with the Christmas cards we sent them, and they're here to take revenge. Of course, claiming that many elderly people are trying to poison children in Germany is nonsense, obviously. This was a single case, just like the other example was a single case. When you start treating people in bulk, you take away their agency, their individuality, and their humanity. This same sort of dehumanization is only a couple of steps away from what the Nazis did to the Jews, and this is what he doesn't understand most, in my opinion. The worst part about him is that he plays right into the hands of fascists, whether knowingly or not. His alternative facts and outright lies help stir hatred that can have serious consequences in the real world. Who knows, maybe some of those that contributed to the tripling of far-right violence in Germany mentioned earlier were viewers of his, or people like him. I mean, honestly, he even used the triple bracket nonsense. It's a fascist way of covertly labeling Jews or Jewish plots, whatever those are, in a video title on censorship. At the end of the day, he doesn't care. As long as he gets his paycheck from the erectile dysfunction pills he sells, he genuinely doesn't seem to care. He may be a meme, but he's a dangerous, uneducated one.
Imagine my shock. Well, imagine my shock. Imagine my shock. Imagine my shock. Well, imagine my shock. Well, imagine my shock. Well, imagine my shock.